Hi, I am Dr. Gibson, Dr. Angela Gibson, and I am probably not your instructor. I usually start with, "Hi, I'm your instructor for this class," but I'm glad to see you all here. And so, those of you that are doing back to backs, I welcome you to be on camera, off camera. You can jump on the chat. You can unmute and get on to the mic if you so wish. We are going to, I want to see your questions, your comments. Want to see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Tell me emojis, tell me LOLs, whatever, but I'd love to know what's working for you. I am a contributing faculty member and dissertation advisor doctoral for the doctoral program, the educational doctoral program here at USAHS. And that's a picture of me when I'm in my happy place at NASA. But what we're going to do today is talk about reading and note taking as it pertains specifically to transferring that learning from your course and scholarly materials from an online class, okay? Because for those of you that were just in our session on working harder, not smarter. No, wait, it was working smarter, not harder. There you go. We don't want to work harder. We want to work smarter, but working smarter, not harder in online asynchronous classes. A lot of times when we're in this online environment, um, that transfer of learning, the actual like from the content into our brain and then back out of our brain for assignments and practical use doesn't always happen. There's a disconnect. And that can happen in face to face classes too. But we are in a very online environment, whether you might be taking synchronous classes where you meet live but online, or asynchronous classes where you engage with each other at different times of the day and week, but online. So we're going to talk about these things. And I want to also know what works for you. So if we're talking about some things and you're like, hey, I tried that and it didn't work, or oh, I wonder how that's going to work for me in particular, or I have this particular issue or concern, then let's talk about it. Okay, so let's post it in the chat. We can discuss it. We can, one size does not fit all. We know that. So we're going to look at some foundational success skills when it comes to reading college level materials. We're going to talk about some reading strategies that are foundational. We're going to talk about reading strategies for scholarly and class resources. And we're going to talk about note-taking success skills. So we have a lot to cover. So I want to know from you, what are some challenges with success with reading your course content, with reading scholarly material in your online classes? Post in the chat, or maybe it's not for you. Maybe you just know that these are challenges in reading course content, in reading scholarly materials, and online classes. Yep, too much information, Cynthia. Yep, absolutely. The overload, those evil professors. Why did they assign you 7 articles to read this week? Yeah. Yep, Catherine, absolutely. The amount of reading material, evil professors. Yep. Sometimes it's for a reason. I like to tell myself that when I assign that much. Like, no, really, all 7 of these articles are necessary for you to understand what we're talking about. But, patient, yeah, overload is crazy, it's too much to digest. I will tell you, I do tell my students, especially at the beginning of the term, I say, listen, look at what I provide in readings, and I will walk through like the first week with them and I'll show them. And I said, I provide some variations on materials. For me, it's because I know not every learner is the same. So sometimes I'll provide videos, and then I'll have like a journal article, and then I'll have more of a quick read, popular, credible type source article. I might have, a report or an infographic or some, change it up so that we all know we're different types of learners. Also, one source does not, get everything. So it's hard because on one hand, we're like, oh, let's give them all the examples. And so in my education classes, I teach a wide variety. I don't just teach nursing students or physical therapy students or athletic trainers. I teach a wide variety of students. And so I might have a variation on this article this week is for, a case study with nurses. Next week is a point of view of a physical therapist, and something like that. But of course, that doesn't make my students happy when I'm like, I'm like, but there's a reason. And they're like, yeah, but it's still 7 articles. But yeah. So Natalie says, sometimes I feel I'm just reading and not necessarily reading to understand. It can be overwhelming. Absolutely. So today we're going to hopefully address a number of those things. Now, some of those things that we're going to talk about today might be things you go, I know that. Okay. But some of us might be like, huh, I hadn't really thought of that, or I'm not familiar with that point of view. So all this is based on the research, the literature, and effective practice, but we're going to start with the foundational success skills. Environment does matter. So put in the chat if you don't mind. Where do you read? Do you read on the bus? Do you have an audiobook for the car? Do you read on breaks in the break room at work? Do you read in your big comfy chair or moon beanbag chair at night? Do you read in the kitchen in a hardwood chair to keep you awake? Where do you read? Okay. So Cynthia says anywhere, anytime, any place. So that's hopefully that works for you. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Sarah says in my room at my desk. Catherine says at my desk in my room. Yep. Okay. Um, good. Good examples. How does it change? Does it change for you? Yes or no? Does it change for you when it comes to personal reading versus academic reading of where you read? Does it, do you have a different spot for personal reading or academic reading? You have a different spot or it's all the same? Something to think about. Brooke says, yes, personal in room and office for school, delineation. Nice. Okay. Cynthia's like, what personal reading time? Yep, absolutely. Yes, yes. I tend to like fall asleep with the personal reading at night and end up with a book on my nose. But yeah, so yeah, so you have to think about for each of those things, what is your environment? What is your purpose? If you're reading for pleasure versus reading for certain absorption and understanding and use later, because we could have a whole webinar just on memory skills and techniques. But your environment does matter and you want to be comfortable, but not too comfortable. We were just talking about that before this session. And, as I mentioned in the previous session, I was reading some articles on distractibility. It happened to be mostly on ADHD, but just distractibility in general. And it talked about you don't want to be too comfortable. You actually want to have some discomfort, not like you're hurting yourself, but so that your brain actually is trying to stay focused and stay awake, as opposed to, oh, this is nice and comfortable. Some other foundations is scheduling a time. I think Cynthia said anytime, anywhere, any place. But also, we also need to know that we're not going to be distracted. You know, um, a couple of you mentioned that you're just reading and you're not absorbing it. You're not getting it for understanding. You're not being able to use it later. And that's important to know what times of the day are best for you to read. Also, what times of the day, what space and time can actually help you, if you're trying to read for absorption and read for understanding. And that I tend to say readings need to be considered as an assignment. So if you're creating a plan for your week, if you're creating a to-do list, if you're prioritizing your schedule, you need to think about reading as an assignment. So instead of just going, I know I need to read, I don't need to put it down as an assignment. Read chapter 1, read article 4, 5, and 6, and put that into your time and your schedule as you would as if you're working on an assignment, because you do have to hopefully read before you work on your activities, discussions, and assignments. And then another thing to think about with foundational skills is always have a pen or and paper or the screen ready to take notes, because if you are not doing something with the reading, which we're going to get to in a minute, then you're not going to absorb as much. At a desk out of my room is where I read, because my room is too much of a relaxing space. Absolutely. So some people need to be outside of that comfort area in order to focus on the readings. Good. As you are figuring out what works best for you, and if you're here, you're probably not, the expert yet. Even myself, I have to do a regular, I'm not the total expert on this, but I would say that this is something I've been working on and training on for a number of years. But also, I find that I have to reassess myself at regular intervals. I have to figure out what works best for me, time of the day, space, environment, um, structure, routine, my success habits. I have to evaluate that regularly because if I don't, I'll start realizing something's not working for me, and then I'm not sure exactly why. So knowing yourself, whether jotting down some, oh, that worked well for me, I'm going to keep track of when it works well. I'm going to keep track of when it doesn't work well, and figuring out what tools and strategies work for you. So those are just some foundational items to think about when we talk about success in general. And now we're going to look at foundational success strategies for reading in particular. The previous session this evening was success skills for asynchronous learning, and we talked a lot about time management and focus and planning. So now we were just talking about some of those foundational skills just a second ago. And so now we're going to look at foundational skills for reading in particular. This can be readings. When I talk about readings, know that what I'm talking about are anything that's course material. It could be audio, it could be video, it could be textbook, it could be articles, it could be any of the material. It's there for a purpose. Maybe you didn't read all 7 articles this week. Maybe you read 6 of the articles. Maybe you read 5 of the articles. But still, when you read it, it needs to be purposeful. And so we need to be able to have those strategies to help us with not only the learning, like we learn the material, but also academic success, getting good grades. It comes down to that. We want the good grade, but we also want to learn because we want to apply this in our professional work. So different types of reading materials, all these things. So when I say reading materials, I mean, it can be any of these and all of these when it pertains to your classes. Okay. Um, so we need to begin with the end in mind. We have to plan. We have to think about when we're looking at the list of readings, whatever they are, how does it fit with what we're learning this week in the class, with the learning objectives, with our topic? How you have to think about how might I use what I'm reading in an assignment. We have to think about what's the purpose of what I'm reading in the bigger picture for the professional field, the literature, the research. So if we have a framework for thinking about our readings for the week and have that intentionality, then more likely we're going to find meaning in what we're doing. So these are some foundational reading strategies, like not reading because we were told to. Yes, I know your professor tells you to read, but why? You know, so some things to think about when we're faced with whatever material it is. It could be a report, it could be a chapter in a textbook, it could be a journal article, it could be a video, it could be all sorts of things. But one of the, if it has an abstract, review the abstract. These are all preview. This is actually a strategy in readings. Preview, okay? If it has an abstract, look at the abstract. If it doesn't, or if it does, what's the topic? What do you already know? Look for clues, contextual clues, introductions, glossaries. There's more clues, headings, charts, graphs. Previewing without starting like sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. Preview is like looking at the overall picture and content that is there. Then you want to read for comprehension. These are basic reading strategies. You need to, and these are all purposeful strategies that if these aren't part of what you already do, you can have like a cheat sheet for reading. You can have like reading success strategies and you can have these down, and you need to like actually actively think about and ask yourself these questions and use these strategies as you read. And then once you do it more and more and more, you don't even have to look at your cheat sheet anymore, and you're doing it already. So when you are reading for comprehension and you're going through content, or when you finished a section, not the whole thing, but a section, you want to ask yourself, what was the main idea of that section? Could I answer a question about it if I was asked? Are there exam questions that could be created based on this section? And then look at the review sometimes at the end of the chapter or end of a reading, there might be some takeaway questions or some points of interest or clarification points. Different sources write it different ways. But you can look at those questions and quiz yourself because that's going to help you with the comprehension. And then you can ask yourself, what were the keywords and key points from what I read? Because then that helps you with recall. Like, how much did I actually recall? What do I remember from what I just read? Now, waiting until you're done with all the readings, you're going to lose a lot of this. That's why you want to do it for sections. Okay. And that's why having a cheat sheet for reading strategies can be helpful. And you want to be able to test yourself for that recall, because if you don't have that recall, then there might be an issue with reading for comprehension, which we're going to look at in just a few minutes. Okay. Any questions, comments, ideas, you can post them in the chat. So I'm just keep looking at the chat. So again, knowing that reading strategies specifically for scholarly and class sources, whether it be video or audio recordings, journal articles, texts, reports, whatever, it's all meant to help you learn. So let's take some time to go over reading strategies for these particular types of materials. So I kind of find it hard to sometimes read scholarly sources. I don't know about you, but you're reading that journal article and you're having to look at the first paragraph, and you're like, okay, I just read the first paragraph and I have no idea what they just said. Some journal articles are they're like intense. And some journal articles are more, they have better flow and they're easier to read. However, we're tasked to be able to read these sources because they are teaching us something. Okay. And some students are like, well, I would do better if I printed out that 17-page journal article. Yeah, maybe not. But I just put in the chat some different different tools to help you when you have large reading items that are online. So there's the print to PDF. For some students, they want to read offline. So professor puts journal article in the classroom, you open the journal article, it opens up to whatever journal, and you're reading, maybe it's Sage, maybe it's, Taylor and Francis, whatever, and you're reading and it's like 17 pages and you're like, you know what? I need to do something with this and I don't want to kill some trees. So what do? You can print it to PDF and you can read it offline. And that way you can take notes, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you can read and take notes offline. You sometimes when you're using an online source, sometimes there's like pop-ups and ads and things, and that gets really distracting when you're reading and you're trying to be like, blinders and read just the article. So there's the second thing I put in the chat is media blockers to help with focus. And then the third piece is eye strain. And you might be like, oh, that's not why I'm having problems. Well, it could be. It could be. I know, I get it. Sometimes I actually have to take a whole day off screen. I take Saturdays off. It's off screen because, like, yes, I am old, but it hurts after a while looking at the screen all day. So there's some help with eye screen. So, the harder the material is to understand and the more intense and engaged you have to be with it, believe it or not, some of these strategies are things that have nothing to do with the content, that have to do with you and your environment. So, what else can we do? Some other things for scholarly sources. Now, going back again, we have our foundational reading strategies. We just mentioned a few. Building on top of those, getting to know terminology and conventions. Okay. Reading journal articles is not the same as reading a textbook chapter or reading a popular, credible source. And it's definitely not a one and done type of event. So, when it comes to terminology or conventions, as it's also called, I'm going to put this in the chat for you. They are those standard concepts and terminology and key terms that you're going to find in academic and scholarly sources. And you need to get used to them because, like I said, sometimes you get to open that journal article and you're reading that first paragraph and you're like, I have no idea what they just said. Okay. So getting used to those similar and familiar terms will help you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about scholarly sources in a moment. But I want you to know that you need to get used to those terms. You need to create like a cheat sheet, whether it's written down or on a Word or Google Doc. And you need to look up those terms and you need to define them. Okay. And different programs and different professions are going to have slightly different terminologies. So get to know those conventions. Also, building on those foundational reading strategies that we just talked about, you're going to want to look up key terms and key phrases. You're going to want to look for those main ideas and themes. You're going to want to pay attention to those headers and charts and tables and graphs. Okay. There's a reason they're put in there. They're trying to tell you something. Okay. So, again, previewing your reading. That helps you going back to those foundational scholarly foundational sources for reading will help you with your scholarly sources for readings. So preview the material, look for headings, look for key terms and phrases, look for charts, tables, graphs, figures, look for maybe questions or takeaways at the end. Then while you're reading, read a section at a time. Some people need to type it out, their notes. Some people write it out. Some people do mind maps and draw. Okay. Whatever you're doing is going to help your memory with connection. And also, you're going to have a record of what you just read. Because, like we talked about before, sometimes you're reading and reading and reading, and you're like, I don't know what I just read. Okay. So, if you're doing something physical with it, you're more likely going to have it transfer into your memory. And then you're more likely going to be able to have a record of it to look at when you're trying to do your assignment later, or you're trying to put it together to understand the concepts for something you might be doing with your clinical or your practicum or whatever you're doing. Also, can you then summarize a section, whether it's summarized in your notes or type notes or written notes, or can you ask yourself, what was the point of that section? Okay, because then not only will you have a written summary, but you also are able to go to that next level of critical thinking and go from just learning to evaluating and summarizing your learning. And then can you review when you're done? Can you ask yourself, what was the key point of that section? What key terms did I learn? What was the summary? And if you can quiz yourself, you're more than likely going to be able to say that I have retained that information. Again, the note piece is helpful because you're doing something with the reading. So, scholarly sources, again, harder. There's a lot more content, higher level terminology, really high level writing. Okay. They're at that top of their game type writing. Um, so we want to look for certain things. But again, preview by skimming and scanning the article first. Don't just start with sentence one. Consider, what is it that I'm supposed to be learning this week? What was the topic again? What are my learning objectives again? What are we doing? What's going on? What are the assignments? Thinking about what's the purpose of the reading. And then starting with the abstract. A lot of scholarly sources will have an abstract. Okay, that helps us with, that's sort of like a brief summary of what this article is all about. If they don't have an abstract, fine, move on. But most of them will have an abstract. Taking notes from the abstract is helpful. Introduction, it's a section. What's the main point of this study or article? What's the main idea? Can you write it out in a sentence or a couple phrases? As you're going through, find those keywords and descriptors. Help yourself with the purpose. Why was this article written? Why is this professor having me read it? Not just for the assignment, but why about this article? Find in the article, what was the purpose of the study? Why did these researchers even go to the effort of doing this research and writing it up? What were their research questions? What were they trying to learn? If you can find that, then you're going to learn more about the topic and you're going to connect with it. What kind of methods did they use? This might be, again, the terminology that you're not used to. So think about what methods they used. Was it qualitative? Was it quantitative? Was it mixed methods? What kind? And if those terms are not familiar with you yet, let's look those up. But the idea being, how did they get the data they wanted to answer their questions on, they had a reason for the study. You just figured that out. You look for it. You look for the reason for the study. They had questions. So how did they find their answers? Well, that's their methodology. And then what did they find? Where's the info? What was the data results? And then what did they conclude based on that data? And if you're asking these questions, if you use these questions for like a framework for as you're reading through scholarly sources, you're reading with purpose, you're reading with engagement, you're reading with intensity, and you're also, if these were like headers on a piece of paper or a Word document or a Google Doc, and you could answer these, then you're taking good notes and you're reading with purpose and you're further understanding the content. Okay, I don't see any comments yet, questions, but feel free to post them. All right, so parts of an article. Now we're getting deep. Now we're getting into the scholarly stuff. We're getting into the crunchy bits. I often will tell my students, yeah, that article was a bit crunchy. And they're like, Dr. Gibson, are you eating the paper that these articles are written on? I'm like, no, not that kind of. But to me, like when I'm reading them and they're like they're intense, they're just, there's a lot of, it's like getting a bag of potato chips. Again, I'm hungry. I don't know what it is. I said that in the last session. I'm like talking about food. Okay, so scholarly articles. We're at the level in all of our programs where we're expected to be able to read scholarly sources as well as like, go find them, the literature, the research, bring that back, that kind of thing, evaluate it. So we need to understand what these scholarly sources are. If we understand how most scholarly sources are organized and what the point is of these weird terms that they put in these journal articles, then we're going to have better comprehension. Okay, so this is an example of some basic common components of research articles and what it means to you as you're reading. Okay, title, what's the point of it, right? Author, some people that worked on it, but that might be important because they might be from a field that's same as yours or different than yours. Abstract, summary, keywords, helps with like the focus of what their topic is on. The introduction is usually like the main background or ideas of what the concept of the study. The literature review. What is this literature? She keeps talking about the literature, the research, the stuff that you would find in the databases of the library, right? In the journal articles, in the scholarly sources. So basically, if an author is publishing something in a research journal or they did research and they publish it in a scholarly journal, they pretty much have to say what else has happened before they got to this point based on prior research, and that's the literature review. And so a lot of times a literature review is a good place to find additional sources for other research. So if your instructor says, read these 7 journal articles and then go find a source that's similar on this topic, might be something in there for you. Methods or methodology, as I mentioned, it's how they collected the data, right? Okay, so again, qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, but what is it that they did to get the data that they needed? Then the discussion is usually the results and what it means for the problem that they found in the beginning to even start their study and the purpose of their study. And then there's going to be figures and tables and charts and to like demonstrate different things about the results that they found from the data that they collected based on the problem that they knew was happening and they didn't have an answer to. And then their conclusion is typically what the whole point of their research was, what did they find, and why it's a good thing. So if you can learn the components, if you can learn the terminology, then it's going to be easier to digest um, a scholarly source and also to connect and engage with the content. Think about, again, having a plan as you study, having those questions for the basic reading success skills and strategies, preview method, what this topic section was about. Can I summarize? Can I have some key points that I can remember? Can I answer some questions that I might come up with to help me quiz that I actually learned it? But then also questions specific to your class and possibly your assignments and possibly your own research that you might be doing with your capstone or your dissertation or in your professional work. And these are some examples from Brown University that you may want to ask yourself and have out. Also, another cheat sheet. Um, so, as you're working through these articles to make it meaningful to you, because a lot of times, you guys even said it, you read and you're like, okay, I just read, but I have no idea what just read because you didn't engage and it's not you, it's all the things, right? So it could be their environment, it could be how you feeling that day, how your brain is at that point, those foundational success strategies for reading, but also what does it mean to you? You need to find personal meaning in that content, in that reading. And sometimes there isn't personal meaning. And so then you have to relate it back to, okay, how is this going to help me learn for this particular class or this particular assignment? So there are some questions to think about. How is the article relevant to my own work? Did it give me new perspective? Can I use the article to answer questions for my assignment? Are there questions I have now based on what I just learned? So sometimes we do all these things and there are still challenges. Um, Oftentimes there's a lot that we have to do all at once, and we will try to do all the readings all at the same time and try to just, like, okay, I have an hour, I can read 7 articles. Maybe you'll read them, but they didn't actually read them for understanding. So try to plan out your week as much as you can, where you can slow down, that you can plan out, that you can ask yourself questions and take notes as you go along. If you can explain it to somebody else, it will make sense to you. But if you don't get it the first time, go back and use those contextual clues, look up terminology, and then if you're still having issues with the readings, you're like, I just don't get it, then contact your professor. Another strategy is, again, we're breaking down things and chunking things, especially when there's a lot of material all at once, is a formula that is used by some people, the 10-page rule. You read 10 pages while taking notes, you take a break, like off screen, get up, physically get up, go get that drink of water, go put the laundry on, walk the dog, whatever it is. Take a break, time yourself so you're not like, oh, I'm going to go watch a show. I'll be back in 2 hours. Okay. And then come back and read 10 more pages while taking notes. You can also combine, for those of you that were in my last session on, asynchronous learning strategies, you can combine this with some of the other time management things we talked about, the Pomodoro method, and study, the study with me things that we talked about. But you can combine this with other strategies. The idea is that you set a strategy. If 10 pages is too much, then do 8. If 8 is too little, do 12. But you know yourself best. So read while doing something like taking notes, whether it's on the computer or handwritten, and then take that break, getting up, and then coming back. Some other things, again, you're like, I'm trying all these things and they're not working. Okay, it's completely possible and things happen. And you have to find what works for you. One size does not fit all. So I just put in the chat. Some people would like to hear it rather than read it. And they can take notes as they hear it and they can put it to the speed that they want. And so there are some free text to speech, but some also cost, but also check privacy because some people have concerns with the privacies for that accessibility option. There is an Android text to speech you can look at. There is Speechify, which is pretty funny. You can have Snoop Dogg read to you. I mean, who doesn't want Snoop Dogg read to them? I Snoop Dogg can do whatever he wants because, you know, he was at the Olympics and he was a torchbearer for the United States. So, I mean, he's Snoop Dogg. And then of course there's Flavor Flav. But, I get it. I should have used Flavor Flav when we were talking about time management earlier today. So, because the clock. Anyway, I digress. Read aloud. You can the other the other thing. There's an app for actually reading aloud, and so some of these apps might be helpful to you, especially if you're like, I'm still having some issues and I need some help. Okay, try something new. Okay, I know we're covering a lot. Let me see where we're at. All right, we're about to talk about note taking because I've talked about, I keep saying you can take notes. You can take notes. You can, Dr. Gibson, you haven't said how to take notes. Okay, let's talk about notes. And some people are like, well, you just write stuff down. Sure, but sometimes just writing stuff down doesn't always help. So we need to figure out what works for us and we need to switch up as needed. So some people do better if they're on the computer taking notes, and some people do better if they are reading on the computer and taking notes with pen and paper or pencil and paper. If you are on the computer, you can use functions such as the highlighter in PDF or Word document. More on that in a minute. But you definitely want to highlight important terms, definitions, facts, phrases. So I remember my first science class in undergrad, and I think the book was like this thick, and it was one of those awesome classes from like way back when it was just the midterm and the final, and the instructor would stand up at the front of class for an hour and 20 minutes with the lights off and like showing slides and just talking at us for the entire time. Super fun. Anyway, so I would go back to, studying and I would open up the textbook and I would get my yellow highlighter because I was so excited that I had a yellow highlighter and I was allowed to highlight in the book because in high school they told us not to write in the book on pain of death. And I was like, oh, I get to highlight in the book. It's my book. I ended up highlighting the entire chapter. So all that did was make my chapter yellow. Doesn't help. So you have to have a plan. You have to figure out your own way of doing it. What you need, like, will highlighting work for you? Will different colors work for you? Will writing in the text help for you? Do you want to highlight in yellow key terms? Definitions are light blue, and questions are question marks, and then you put the note in the margin. Whatever works for you, okay? But figure out what works for you, without like going through 12 highlighters. Also, some things that can help um, annotate the text. Oh, I gave you just a few minutes ago a print to PDF option. So if you have a journal article or any other type of source, and let's say your instructor has it as a link, or maybe even they have it in PDF in the class, but they have a link or a Word document in class, you can take it offline by doing a print to PDF. And then with the PDF, you can actually highlight and you can type in the margins, and you can put symbols and notations, and that's called annotating the text. And so you're using it using whatever key or code that you want to. Um, Now, that's in addition to taking notes. So some people like to annotate the text and then go back and write their notes. Some people annotate the text while taking their notes. Some people take notes and then are doing both, like they put keys in their notes. So you have to find what works for you. But in addition to those key terms and key facts and definitions and phrases, you are looking at questions that you have about what you're reading. So you're going to either in your notes or in the text itself or on the article document, you're going to put those questions that you have, like, um, like, I wonder why they did that, or what was the problem that they were seeking, or how will this affect my field, or think about, what it is that you have a question based on what you're reading, not like question, I don't understand this, but that could be a question too, but like a content question that you have. Um, Marking up your text, again, don't go highlighter happy. That would be like just a bad use of your time. And highlighters don't cost that much, but still, it's a bad use of the highlighter. As I mentioned, you can create color references, you can develop your own codes and symbols, just as long as you remember what they are. I know way back when before everything was online, I used to take notes in this history class in college, and it was like a 400 level class, and sometimes, one of us would be out or because we were sick or we had a study group. So I had to put a key code at the top of my notes on what my symbols were, because when we would swap notes at our study group, no one would know like what everybody else's symbols were, or like, okay, what does, XY7 mean or whatever, and, oh, that meant that. So just so you don't go back, "Well, I don't know what I put there, Also, write and annotate in the margins of your text or your scholarly source or whatever your source is, those key terms, things that you need to look up, definitions. Again, going back to those reading success skills, your main ideas, summaries. Can you write a summary? Can you write it in there, type it in, or put it in your notes? The summary, the questions you have about the articles, the questions you have for later, questions that will fit to the assignment. Use your sources. They are more than just words on a screen. Then, then the thing that I was sharing in the previous section, uh, some examples from my son, who's now in his second year now. Wow, second year of college. And for the life of me, so he got to the point where it really. I'm sure one day he's going to be like, I just hated the fact that I had a mother who was in education, because she made me do all these strategies that she's like, no, it's in the research. Would you like to read? I used to say to him, would you like to read the article? Because you're not believing me that it works. And he's like, no, I'm not going to read the article about it. But this is where I couldn't get him to do this. And hopefully he'll start doing it. He started doing it a little bit this summer when he had that terrible chemistry class that was, well, I mean, it wasn't terrible. It was a pretty good chemistry class, but it was all asynchronous, which is just crazy. Anyway, so you took the notes. So you did the readings and you annotated up your textbook or your scholarly source or whatever you were reading, or you took notes by hand or whatever you did. Now you need to do something with them. Okay. This is the next step. This is like leveling up. Okay. This is like expert level. Okay, you're going to take those notes and you're going to do something with them. You can rewrite them or retype them. You can put keywords in the margins. You can check for alignment with your assignment. Did you get down the information from the readings that you need for your assignment? What is missing? What definitions do you need to look up? What could you do better the next time you sit down tomorrow, the next day, when you do your readings? And now, not only do you have notes, hopefully, that transfer that learning, because you had to actively physically do something, and then you had to do something again with that content, that rewriting the notes, okay, or doing something else with the notes. And it all is like being transferred into your memory, but then you have to be able to use it, right? The recall. So now that you have that, you have your first set of notes or your annotated notes on your source, and you have your write ups or your additional notes that you've worked on. Does it go back to the assignment? Do you have what you need to create the assignment? Do you have what you need to study for the midterm? Do you have what you need to study for the final? Okay. Now, some things that also help with scholarly sources, kind of changing just a little bit when it comes to sourcing your scholarly sources. If you're trying to find content to use, let's say your instructor told you to go out and find articles or scholarly sources to use for an assignment or a paper or whatever you're working on. You can use these strategies the same way to find the sources you need. Was the article helpful? Then you can use the article to use the sources that they have in their article to explore more. Was the article not useful? Still check out their sources that they used. Um, Look at their citations, look at their references. Maybe something will be useful to you. So sometimes we need to be able to read these scholarly sources in order to help ourselves with our own research. Okay. So that's something to think about. That's why reading for scholarly sources is really important to understanding those sections, because you're going to be told to go do some research yourself. Um, I was talking about annotation. You either the PDF document and highlighting or making notes on it, or um, doing that by hand, or maybe if you have an online text. But there are some, I'm going to put these in the chat. There are some annotation tools that might be useful to you. And everyone has to kind of find their own way of using it. Some of them are free and some of them are not free. Your instructor might already be using them. I mentioned the print to PDF. That works. And you can also annotate in Google Docs. So if you're working with a study group or a study partner, annotating in Google Docs is really nice. It's great anyway, even if it's just you. But if you're sharing notes with others or in a study group, like I said, the annotation of, you can annotate articles together. That is actually something you can do as a group, which is kind of fun. So what does it look like in real life? Here is, I'm going to put in the chat, this is the free version that I used to do this. And I took an article, a very crunchy journal article with a lot of terms and phrases and intense things. So this is me annotating. These are all the little yellow quotation marks. You see, I highlighted some things, I underlined some things, I created sticky notes, I put look up terms, and I said these terms I wanted to look up. You can see, this was what the source looked like. I'll go back, sorry, oops. Let me go back, go back, go back, go back. And again, this is just the front page, but you can see where I was annotating it for my own use. And then what I can do is take those pieces, follow up with those, and create another set of notes. So also, again, we know that one size does not fit all. There's some other note-taking tools. I'm going to put them here in the chat. And you might want to try and see if they're useful to you. Some people like to do talk to text where they talk, and Google types for them. So you just have to go back and edit it. The more you use it, the more Google gets to know your voice, which is creepy, but there you go. That's online learning now. It is a little creepy. When they first started, I was like, no way. It gets to know you. Yeah. Notability, Microsoft OneNote and Evernote, they all are useful for note-taking, accessibility, and adaptability. So that was a lot. And the idea was to be focused on the foundational reading success skills to help you with scholarly success skills in reading those scholarly sources, and also to transfer that content to your actual brain so that it sticks there and it's nice and sticky, and then you can use it in recall for your assignments and for your learning and for your actual practice. So, based on that, questions, thoughts, what do you think you might try? What have you tried and you're like, it didn't really work, but I'm going to try something different. And for those of you that have joined us a little late, from well, no, I mean, weren't here at the very beginning when I posted this, to record your attendance and receive your badge, you can click on this link here. So, what are you thinking? Get on the chat, get on the mic, ask questions. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? What might you try? Dr. Gibson, you gave me a whole bunch of links and I haven't even opened a single one of them yet. You're making us do reading when this was all about making reading easier. Why are you making us read 17 articles? Cynthia, thanks. You're hopefully it'll be very helpful to you. Adobe is working for you so far. Okay. So like you using the Adobe PDF? Oh, okay, great. And yep, okay, good. So Adobe PDF and doing like the annotated PDF. That's great. I'm glad that's working. Now, remember the next step after that is actually doing something with the notes, whether it's taking another set of notes or following up on like keywords or definitions, or asking yourself, can you summarize what you just read and can you put it down on paper? You know, what questions do you think might show up on the test or might use for the assignments? So take it to the next step after that Adobe piece. Yep, absolutely. Natalie says, I use GoodNotes. Excellent. To keep track of all my handwritten notes on my iPad. Ah, okay, right. So the handwritten notes on the iPad and the GoodNotes, good. Natalie, what do you think also might help with more connection to those reading scholarly sources? Do you think that, do you take notes on the iPad as you're reading? Is that what you're saying? Maybe? Catherine says, I think the information on applying my notes in another manner to help retention will be helpful to me. Catherine, awesome. I hope so. I absolutely hope so. Remember, if one way doesn't work, try another. Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's the environment, sometimes it's how we're feeling that day. Sometimes it's remembering what our purpose is. Why are we even reading this article? What are we supposed to get out of it? Um, Also, different strategies help with different types of material. Good. And then if you guys want to follow up with me, if you want to get some more ideas, if you want to say, hey, Dr. Gibson, I tried all 12 things that you sent us and none of it works. What do you think? You know, or hey, I had an epiphany at a light bulb moment. I really find this to be helpful. You know, that's my email, though I'm not your professor. You can still connect with me and we can figure out what might be helpful to you. So, thank you so much. Remember, you got this. It can be done. You just have to find the right tool, the right environment, the right format, the right strategies to help you be successful, not only in your learning, but also successful in your um, academics. Thank you so much for being here this evening. It's been great. You had great questions, great comments, and I hope you are super awesome for your semester ahead. Yep, you're welcome. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all. Yep. Get motivated. Tackle those readings. Knock them over. Plow through them. All the metaphors. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.